Recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Rosenstein, for your testimony here and your service. A number of things I'm curious about here. First of all, in the interview of Hillary Clinton that took place reportedly July 2nd of 2016, how many people were in the room for that? How many people had the opportunity to question her?
Congressman, I do not know the answer to that. I believe when the Inspector General completes his review, we may have additional information, but I personally do not know.
Mm-hmm. And would you know who selected that team?
No, I do not.
Really? Okay. I recall a testimony here by James Comey and also by then Attorney General Loretta Lynch that testified, one of the two of them, that there were 3 representatives of the FBI and 3 representatives of DOJ in that room doing that interview. Would that be consistent with practice that you would anticipate? Am I going to hear IG again?
Typically, we would have at least 2 agents conduct an interview, and there may be any number of attorneys based upon who's on the case. I just don't know the details of that particular decision.
Okay. And the practice in an interview like that, would there be records kept of that interview?
Yes. If there were FBI agents present, typically they would take notes and produce a report summarizing the interview. Would
there be a videotape, audio tape, or a transcript?
Generally, no.
Uh-huh. And why not?
Well, it's just not, it's not the practice to do it.
It needs to become the practice. The practice out across the countryside, many of our local law enforcement is that if you're a county deputy and you're interviewing somebody for drunk driving, you tape that interview. And we have sheriffs out there that will say, if they don't do that, that's cause for discipline. Now we're sitting here with a mystery on what went on in that interview of July 2nd, and there's many questions have been asked about that before and after, and they will trickle through history until we get to the bottom of it. We don't know yet who was in the room. At least you can't tell me who was in the room. Do you have any knowledge that Peter Strzok might have been one of those people?
I do not know.
It's been reported in the news that he was one of those people. Are you aware of that?
I've read a lot of news reports. I may have seen that in the news, but I personally do not know.
I see. And when I look through just a timeline here, just quickly to drop this into the record, April, May of 2016, Peter Strzok interviews Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills, who happened to be in the room with Hillary Clinton and her general counsel and her chief of staff and is subject to the investigation. Then on May 2nd, Comey emails FBI officials a draft statement a couple of months before his recommendation not to prosecute Hillary Clinton, and in that chain, Peter Strzok's name shows up. It's been reported that he's the one that swapped out the references from gross negligence to extremely carelessness. I don't know if that's true. Do you have any knowledge about that?
No, but I would point out, Congressman, that it's the Inspector General review that has turned up.
I thought that was going to be the answer. And then also skipping forward to July 24th, FBI interviews Michael Flynn on Russia. It's reported in the news that Peter Strzok is in that interview. No knowledge to disagree with the reports that are in the news, however.
Correct.
And then we get the news later on that sometime in midsummer, Peter Strzok had been removed from Mueller's investigative team, but we find out December 4th that took place publicly. I kind of understand that. If that had drifted into the jet stream, perhaps we wouldn't be into the middle of this controversy. But what about if his hands are in so many things, and I've not touched them all by any means, but if he has his hands in this many things, what about the fruit of the poisonous tree? This is the reverse of this. This is the voids of the fruit of the poisonous tree. And I'm looking at what was reported this morning. I just took a picture of the television set on my iPhone just so that we all know what I'm talking about here. A quote from August 6, 2016 text. Lisa Page to Peter Strzok, and they're talking about President Trump. And maybe you're meant, she's speaking to Peter Strzok, her lover, I hear, and maybe you're meant to stay where you are because you are meant to protect the country from that menace. And Peter Strzok's response is, thanks. It's absolutely true that we're both very fortunate, and of course, I'll try and approach it that way. I just don't know it will be tough. It will be tough at times. I can protect our country at many levels, not sure if that helps. Does that sound like a declaration that he would use his job to leverage his work against the President of the United States?
Congressman, the Inspector General's investigation includes interviews of numerous witnesses, and I anticipate, hopefully in the near future, we'll have a report with the Inspector General's conclusions.
Would you have any opinion on the lack of the fruit from the poisonous tree that might have been erased by Peter Strzok?
Well, as a legal matter, Congressman, I can tell you that if evidence is tainted, then that would raise a concern for me. But typically, our cases would be prosecuted based upon witnesses and documents, and not upon the agent, unless the agent personally were a witness in the case. But that would certainly concern us if there were any tainted evidence in the case.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenstein. I appreciate it. Now yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your service to the country, Mr. Rosenstein. Based on the language in your special counsel order, or your order appointing the special counsel, does the special counsel have the authority to investigate any individual who may have obstructed the investigation that FBI Director Comey confirmed on March 20th of this year, which was the Russian interference with the 2016 elections?
The special counsel does have authority to investigate any obstruction related to his jurisdiction.
Does this authority to investigate possible obstruction include investigating President Trump?
I hope you won't take an inference one way or the other, Congressman, but as I've explained, that's simply something we do not do. We do not discuss who may or may not be under investigation.
Well, I'm not asking you whether or not the president is under investigation. I'm just simply asking whether or not your order appointing the special counsel authorizes the special counsel to investigate the president.
It authorizes him to investigate anybody who there's predication to believe obstructed justice.
And that includes the president, correct?
It'll include anybody who was suspected of obstructing justice.
All right. Do you think that it's appropriate for the president to comment publicly on any pending investigation?
Congressman, the decision about whether people in political positions comment on investigations is not mine. My responsibility is to ensure that our investigations are not impacted improperly by any opinion, whether it be a member of Congress or anybody else.
Well, it would not be appropriate for you to comment about any pending investigation, isn't that correct?
Correct.
And the president is the chief law enforcement officer, he considers himself, in the country. It would be inappropriate for him then to comment on a pending investigation, would it not?
Congressman, I believe over the years there have been presidents who have made comments about investigations, and it's simply not my responsibility to make that decision.
Well, do you think it's appropriate for the president to publicly call for the investigation of specific individuals?
I'm simply not going to comment on that, Congressman, other than to tell you it's my responsibility, along with the Attorney General, to make sure that those decisions are made independently by the department based upon the facts and the law.
Has the president ever contacted you to urge action in any pending investigation?
Congressman, I have not received any improper orders, and I'm not going to be talking about particular communications I may have with, which are appropriate communications with the White House.
Well, what would be your legal basis for refusing to answer the question whether or not the president has contacted you to urge any action in any pending investigation? What would be your legal basis for refusing to answer that question?
Congressman, this is not a partisan issue. I worked on an investigation where the previous president encouraged the department to do an expeditious investigation. And so, the question for me is, are we or are we not appropriately making an independent determination, regardless of who comments on it?
Well, my question, I respect your question, but my question is, has the president ever contacted you to urge action in any pending investigation? Yes or no?
I have nothing further to say about it, Congressman.
So you're going to refuse to answer a question from a member of Congress seeking to do oversight?
Now, I've told you, Congressman, that I have not received any improper orders, and I'm simply not going to talk about communications. I think in every administration, senior law enforcement officers have to be able to communicate with the president and his officials about appropriate matters within their responsibility and not comment on it. So you shouldn't draw any inference. It's simply It's simply not appropriate for me to talk about communications I may have with the administration.
So it would be,
I would tell you if something happened that was wrong, if somebody ordered me to do something that was improper, but that has not happened.
well, it would be improper for the president to ever contact you about initiating an investigation of someone, would it not?
We've discussed this previously, Congressman. Presidents have commented publicly, and
No. My question is, it would be improper for a president to contact you about initiating an investigation of someone. It would be improper, wouldn't it?
it would be improper for the president to order me to conduct an investigation that wasn't justified based on
It would
the
be
facts.
improper for the president to ask you to initiate an investigation, would it not?
If it were for improper reasons, yes.
And so is it your testimony today that the president has not asked you to investigate someone specifically?
Congressman, I understand what you're getting at, but as I said, I was in the last administration, and the president of the last administration commented on matters, and there's nothing wrong about
You're
that.
being very artful in
No, I'm not.
jumping around and evading answering my question, and so you're not going to answer it. And
I'm not evading.
That's unfortunate. Are you afraid of President Trump firing you?
No, I'm not, Congressman.
With that, I will yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman.